I took up a babysitting gig to earn some extra cash. It seemed like an easy job, watch the kids while the parents were out for dinner. But as soon as I arrived, something felt really strange. The husband, he gave me this chilling look, his gaze lingering a bit too long. It sent shivers down my spine. I tried to brush it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. I was a pretty 22-year-old girl, so I'm used to getting looks, but this was a weird look. Anyway, the parents left, and I focused on the kids, trying to distract myself from that uneasy feeling. Everything seemed fine until the husband returned unexpectedly, much earlier than expected. He came in alone, and the atmosphere shifted. He was acting strange, saying weird things that made me uncomfortable. I tried to keep calm, to ignore his odd behavior, but his words, they were seriously unnerving. He kept staring at me, his eyes piercing. I was relieved when he said he was leaving again. He just forgot something, but the sense of unease stuck around. Minutes stretched like hours until the wife finally returned. I was on edge, eager to leave that place. I made a hasty exit, feeling a rush of relief as I stepped out of the house. As I walked away, I glanced back and saw the husband standing at the doorway, still staring at me, that chilling look fixed on his face. I started walking faster, wanting to put distance between me and that house. It felt like something wasn't right, like I'd narrowly escaped from a situation I couldn't quite understand. I kept looking over my shoulder, heart pounding, the hairs on my neck standing on end. It felt like a nightmare, like the husband's gaze had followed me out, lingering in the night. I didn't take any more babysitting jobs after that night. The memory of the husband's unsettling behavior, that chilling stare, it's a feeling I can't forget. I took up a babysitting job in a new neighborhood. It was a quaint place, but something felt off from the moment I arrived. The house I was babysitting had seemed normal, but the neighbor next door gave me the creeps. He was this middle-aged man, standing in his front garden, watching. I thought nothing more of it and went in to greet the parents. They had two lovely children, and as the sun was still out, we decided to go out to the yard to play. The neighbor was in his back garden, and as the fence was low, I could see him looking at us. Every time I glanced in his direction, he'd be there, just staring, his gaze unsettling and intense. It made my skin crawl, but I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe he was just curious. I went inside and settled the children before making myself a cup of coffee. The kids were asleep, and I settled in. But the neighbor, he was always there, lingering at his window or pottering around his yard, always watching. I closed all the windows hoping to feel a bit better. But the one window that was at the side of the house didn't have a curtain or blinds, and it was in the direction of his side window. As the evening wore on, I started feeling more uneasy. It wasn't just the way he watched, it was something in his demeanor, something threatening and disturbing. I wished the parents had mentioned something about him. I tried to keep calm, reassuring myself that I was just being paranoid. But then, he started making odd gestures, like waving in a strange, exaggerated way whenever he saw me looking. It felt like he was taunting me, playing some twisted game. As the night progressed, I heard noises coming from his house, bumps and thuds that made my heart race. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right, that there was more to this neighbor than met the eye. I decided to check on the kids more frequently, feeling a growing sense of dread. And that's when I saw him again from the kids' window, standing at the fence that separated our properties, staring directly at me. His eyes, they were cold, calculating, sending a chill down my spine. I tried to avoid making eye contact, but it felt like his gaze was piercing through me. I felt exposed, vulnerable. It was a feeling I couldn't shake off, a fear that wrapped around me like a vice. He started speaking, saying things that sent a shiver down my spine. Threats, dark and menacing. He said things about knowing I was alone, about being able to get to me whenever he pleased. My heart raced, and I wanted to run, to get away from his chilling words. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself that he was just trying to scare me. But there was a coldness in his tone, a certainty that made me doubt my safety. I felt trapped, stranded in a situation that was turning darker by the minute. I wanted to call the parents, to tell them about this neighbor, but fear held me back. What if they didn't believe me? What if things escalated while they were away? I kept an eye on the kids, locked all the doors, and made sure everything was secure. But the neighbor, he kept lurking, his presence suffocating, his words echoing in my mind. Just as I was on the edge of panic, the parents returned home. I hastily said my goodbyes and left, feeling a rush of relief as I stepped away from the house and that chilling neighbor. I walked home, constantly looking over my shoulder, the fear of encountering that man again gripping me. It felt like a nightmare, the kind that doesn't fade with waking up. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of being threatened in a place I thought would be safe. I never went back to that neighborhood, and didn't babysit for that couple again. I took a babysitting job for a family in a quiet neighborhood. The kids were sweet, and everything seemed normal until that fateful night. As I was putting the children to bed, I heard a noise downstairs. I thought it might be one of the parents returning early, but when I went to check, I saw something chilling, an unfamiliar figure lurking in the shadows of the living room. My heart pounded, fear coursing through me. I tried to remain calm, thinking maybe it was just a mistake, someone lost or confused. But the way they stood there, motionless, sent shivers down my spine. I didn't know what to do. The kids were upstairs, and my priority was to keep them safe. I contemplated calling the police, but I didn't want to alarm the children. I mustered up the courage to confront the intruder, hoping they would leave without incident. I cautiously approached, my heart racing with each step. As I got closer, the figure turned towards me, and I saw their eyes glint in the darkness. They didn't say a word, just stared at me with an unsettling intensity. It felt like they were sizing me up, studying my every move. I tried to reason with them, asking who they were and what they were doing there. But they remained silent, their presence menacing and chilling. I knew I had to act fast. I rushed back upstairs to check on the children, my mind racing with thoughts of keeping them safe. They were still sleeping, unaware of the danger lurking downstairs. I locked the bedroom door, hoping it would buy me some time. But I couldn't shake off the fear of the intruder making their way up. I searched for anything I could use to defend the kids and myself. I found a heavy lamp, gripping it tightly, ready to protect the children at all costs. Minutes felt like hours as I listened for any sign of the intruder. The silence was deafening, the tension unbearable. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching the staircase. My heart leaped into my throat. I braced myself, ready to face whatever was coming. The doorknob jiggled, and my pulse raced with terror. I pressed myself against the door, holding the lamp tightly, preparing to fight. But then, the footsteps retreated. I heard the front door creak open and close. The intruder had left, and a wave of relief washed over me. I called the police immediately, explaining what had happened. They arrived quickly and searched the house, but the intruder was long gone. The parents returned home to find the chaos, and I explained everything. They were horrified, grateful that I and the kids were safe. That night was a nightmare I couldn't forget. The feeling of helplessness, the fear of protecting innocent children, it was a chilling experience that stayed with me for a long time. I took up a babysitting job for a family I knew from the neighborhood. They were kind, and the kids were delightful. But things took a dark turn when I started receiving strange messages online. At first, it was just a few odd comments on my social media posts, cryptic messages that made no sense. I brushed them off, thinking they were from some random troll. But then, they became more personal, mentioning details about the family I was babysitting for. It sent chills down my spine. How did this person know about the family? I felt a growing sense of unease, like someone was watching my every move. The messages escalated, turning threatening and sinister. They mentioned specifics about the house, about the children's routines, things only someone close to the family could know. It felt like a violation of privacy, a breach of trust. I tried to trace the messages, to figure out who was behind them, but they were always sent from anonymous accounts. I felt trapped, isolated, not knowing who to trust. The parents were unaware of the situation, and I didn't want to alarm them. But the fear was eating away at me, making each moment at that house feel like a nightmare. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, constantly checking over my shoulder, feeling like someone was watching me from afar. It made my skin crawl, this constant feeling of being stalked. I tried to keep a brave face, to act normal for the sake of the kids. But inside, I was terrified. I didn't know if the threat was just online or if someone was lurking outside the house, watching my every move. The messages grew more specific, mentioning my daily routine, places I frequented, even hinting at when I was alone. It felt like this person was always one step ahead, anticipating my actions. I started doubting everyone, neighbors, passers-by, even the family I was sitting for. I couldn't trust anyone, feeling like I was being watched from all angles. One night, as I was putting the kids to bed, I heard a noise outside. My heart raced, and I peered through the window, expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just an eerie silence. I locked all the doors and windows, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Every little noise made me jump, every shadow felt menacing. I considered leaving, abandoning the job, but I didn't want to leave the kids unprotected. I stayed, feeling like a prisoner in that house, waiting for something terrible to happen. The messages continued, growing more explicit, more threatening. They mentioned the exact time I would be leaving the house, what route I'd take. It felt like this person was toying with me, enjoying the fear they were instilling in me. I called the police, explaining the situation, but without any concrete evidence or a suspect, there wasn't much they could do. I felt helpless, like a pawn in a twisted game. Finally, the night ended, and the parents returned home. I tried to act normal, to hide the terror I'd been experiencing. But as I left that house, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being stalked, of someone out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. It's a nightmare that haunts me, the fear of being watched, of being threatened without knowing who the perpetrator was. I took a babysitting job for a wealthy family, thinking it'd be an easy way to make some extra money. The house was grand, but something about it felt imposing, as if its walls held untold stories. The man of the house had made his fortune in the textile industry, and the air in the house carried an aura of opulence mixed with an unsettling tension. The kids were in bed, and I was in the living room, flipping through a magazine when I heard a loud crash, followed by voices shouting. Fear gripped me as I realized the sounds were coming from inside the house. Armed individuals burst in, their faces obscured by masks. They were shouting demands, asking for something the family didn't possess. I was frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. They herded us into a room, holding us hostage, me, the kids, and the parents. The air was thick with tension and fear. The parents tried to reason with the intruders, pleading for our safety, but the masked individuals seemed driven by something beyond reason. They were aggressive, threatening violence if their demands weren't met. The parents insisted they didn't have what the intruders were looking for, but the armed individuals didn't believe them. I felt powerless, helpless, as if the walls of the room were closing in on us. The children were terrified, clinging to their parents, and I tried my best to keep them calm, to reassure them that everything would be okay. But deep down, I was terrified too. The desperation in the intruders' voices, their menacing demeanor, it was clear they were willing to do anything to get what they wanted. Hours dragged by, the tension in the room escalating with each passing moment. I could hear the kids whimpering softly, their fear palpable. The intruders grew impatient, their threats turning more severe. They demanded immediate compliance or else they would take drastic measures. I felt a surge of fear, knowing that our lives were hanging by a thread. The parents were frantic, trying to negotiate, but it seemed futile. The intruders were unrelenting. Suddenly, a commotion outside drew the intruders' attention. There were sirens, flashing lights, a police presence outside the house. The intruders panicked, realizing they were surrounded. In the chaos, they grabbed what they could and fled, leaving us shaken and terrified. The sound of their hurried footsteps fading away felt like a lifeline. The police arrived and secured the house. They questioned us, and the parents explained that they didn't possess what the intruders were demanding. It seemed like a case of mistaken identity or a botched robbery. As the police conducted their investigation, I couldn't shake off the feeling of terror. The memory of those masked individuals, their aggression, the fear of not knowing if they'd return, it lingered like a nightmare. We were fortunate to come out physically unharmed, but the psychological trauma stayed with us. It was a night of terror, a stark reminder of the vulnerability that comes with simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The safety and security I took for granted shattered within those few hours, leaving behind a haunting experience I wish I could forget. I took a babysitting job for a seemingly ordinary family in a quiet neighborhood. The parents were friendly, and the kids were adorable, a boy and a girl, full of energy and laughter. As the night settled in, things started feeling off. The parents had failed to mention critical information about a family member's mental health issues. I noticed peculiar behaviors, odd whispers from one of the family members, darting glances, and an overall sense of unease that permeated the atmosphere. But I brushed it off, thinking it might be stress or fatigue. The children were put to bed, and I tried to relax in the living room. That's when things took a turn. I heard footsteps, erratic and uneven, coming from upstairs. I froze, my heart racing as the sound drew closer. It felt wrong, unnatural. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The parents hadn't warned me about any potential disturbances or the possibility of someone acting unpredictably. Then, a figure appeared at the top of the staircase, a family member with a history of mental health struggles. Their eyes held a vacant, distant look, sending a chill down my spine. They mumbled incomprehensible words, their movements disjointed and unsettling. I felt a wave of fear wash over me as I realized I was alone with them. I tried to remain calm, to communicate with them, but their words were nonsensical, their actions erratic and unpredictable. I retreated slowly, trying not to alarm them, hoping to reach the phone to call for help. But the figure followed, their presence looming and unsettling. I managed to reach the phone and dial for emergency assistance, whispering frantically, trying to explain the situation without alarming the family member. As I waited for help to arrive, the children stirred from their sleep, sensing the tension in the air. I tried to keep them calm, reassuring them that everything would be okay, though I wasn't certain myself. The situation grew more distressing as the family member's behavior became increasingly agitated and unpredictable. They moved around the house, muttering incoherently, and I felt a growing sense of vulnerability and fear. Minutes felt like an eternity as I waited for help to arrive, trying to maintain control of the situation. The children clung to me, their eyes wide with fear, mirroring my own emotions. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. Relief flooded through me as emergency responders entered the house, taking charge of the situation. They managed to safely intervene and calm the family member down, but the fear and uncertainty of that night lingered within me. The parents returned home, apologizing profusely for not disclosing the family member's condition. They explained it was an unexpected episode, one that hadn't occurred in a long time. I left the house shaken, my mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events. The memory of that night haunted me, especially when entrusting the care of children to someone else. I got this babysitting gig through a friend. Nice family, new in town. The couple seemed cool, but I guess you never really know. Their little girl, Sarah, she was sweet. A bit shy at first, but we hit it off eventually. It was a regular evening. We played some games, watched cartoons, and before I knew it, it was bedtime for Sarah. Tucked her in, read a story, and she was out like a light. I settled down on the couch, flipping through some magazines, waiting for the parents to get back. The mom texted me saying she got called into work. The dad was coming home early. Figured they'd be back soon. But then the dad arrived, looking all serious. He said the wife was in a hurry, so they kissed goodbye at the door. But then, out of nowhere, he tried to kiss me too. It felt so wrong. I pushed him away, but it happened so fast. I was freaked out, but didn't want to make a scene. As soon as he left, I decided to call it quits and head home. But then, a few days later, I got this message. It was from the dad. He said he had footage of us kissing. I didn't even know there were cameras in the house. He threatened to expose it if I didn't do what he wanted. I was scared. I didn't want anyone to see that. So, I met him, hoping to sort it out. But the demands, they were insane. Money, secrets, things I couldn't give. He got angrier each time we met. Threatened to ruin my life. I was trapped. I started noticing weird things after that. Like someone following me. Shadows in the corner of my eye. Breathing on the other end of the line when I picked up the phone. I thought I was going crazy. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just constant fear. One night, I saw something in my room. A shape in the darkness, like a person, but not quite. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't scream. It was like time stood still. Then, it vanished. But I couldn't shake off that feeling of being watched. I went to the police, but they couldn't do much without evidence. And I had none. The dad, he knew how to keep it hidden. I felt so alone, like nobody could help me. Even my friends started to doubt me. They thought I was imagining things. Then, the messages started again. He knew where I was, what I was doing. It was like he was everywhere. I couldn't escape. The fear consumed me, every waking moment filled with dread. I was drowning in it. I tried to confront him, to reason, to beg. But he was relentless, like a monster hiding in plain sight. He enjoyed playing this sick game, toying with my life. I felt like I was on the edge, ready to break. One night, I came home, and the house was eerily silent. No footsteps, no creaks, just this heavy silence that suffocated me. I knew something was off. I searched every room, heart pounding in my chest. And then, in the dim light, I saw it again. The shadow. This time closer, clearer. A figure standing in the hallway. I screamed, but no sound came out. It started moving towards me, slow and deliberate. I couldn't move, my limbs frozen with terror. And then, it stopped. Right in front of me. Its face, if it had one, was just a void. Darkness staring back at me. I don't know what happened next. I woke up in the hospital. They said I had a breakdown. But I know what I saw was real. That shadow, that dread, it's still with me. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I feel its presence, lurking, waiting. I don't think I'll ever be free from it. I was babysitting for this family. Everything seemed okay at first. The parents were nice, the kids were cute. But I didn't know what was going on between their family and another one in the neighborhood. There were tensions, that much was clear. Little things, like glares exchanged at the grocery store or avoiding each other at community events. but I didn't pay much attention to it, just thought it was normal neighborhood drama. It was a typical evening, putting the kids to bed, watching TV. But then, I started hearing noises outside. Not like regular neighborhood sounds. It was more intense. Like arguing, but louder. I peeked out the window, and I saw people. They looked angry, shouting at each other. The other family. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? But what if it was just a misunderstanding? I stayed inside, hoping it would die down. But it didn't. It got worse. Yelling turned into shoving, then things started getting thrown around. I was scared. I wanted to protect the kids, but I didn't want to get involved in whatever this was. Then, a loud crash. I peeked out again, and they were fighting. Fistfights, yelling, chaos in the street. It was like a movie, but real. I couldn't believe it was happening right in front of me. I wanted to call for help, but I was frozen. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. What if they saw me? What if they came after us next? I felt so helpless, just hiding with the kids in the house, hoping it would all stop. But it didn't stop. It escalated. I heard sirens in the distance, but they were still going at it. It was like they were consumed by this anger, this feud. I didn't understand how it got this bad, how people could be so filled with hate. I tried to keep the kids calm, distract them with games and stories. But they could hear it too, the chaos outside. I could see the fear in their eyes, and I felt responsible for keeping them safe. Hours passed. It felt like forever. Eventually, the police arrived, and things quieted down. But the tension lingered in the air, this heavy feeling of unease. I didn't know what was going to happen next. The parents finally came home, looking worried. They rushed in, checking on the kids, asking if everything was okay. I didn't know how to explain what had happened. How do you tell someone their family was in the middle of something so intense? They thanked me, paid me, and I left. But I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. I felt like I had witnessed something I shouldn't have. And I was scared it wasn't over, that it might happen again. The next day, I heard rumors around the neighborhood about what happened. People talking about the fight, the feud. I realized it wasn't just a one-time thing. This was ongoing, simmering under the surface for who knows how long. I didn't want to babysit for that family again. I was scared of being caught in the middle of their feud, of something worse happening. I didn't want to be a part of their unseen war. It changed how I looked at things. How fragile peace can be, how easily things can spiral out of control. I felt a lingering fear, knowing that this kind of conflict was lurking just beneath the surface of our seemingly quiet neighborhood. I tried to put it out of my mind, go back to normal life. But every time I heard a raised voice outside or saw a group of people gathering, I couldn't help but remember that terrifying night. And I prayed it wouldn't happen again. I was babysitting for this family, and they had some tradespeople working on their house. The parents said they'd be home late, so it was just me and the kids. At first, everything seemed normal. The workers were fixing stuff, doing their thing. But then, I started noticing things. Little things that didn't sit right. The workers, they acted weird. Whispering to each other, glancing around like they were hiding something. I tried to ignore it, focus on taking care of the kids, but my gut was telling me something was off. One of the workers, he kept going into rooms he didn't need to be in. I caught him once, just standing in the hallway, looking around all suspicious-like. When he saw me, he acted all casual, like he was just checking things. But I knew better. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they were just doing their job weirdly. But then, I found a door. A door that was always locked, but that day it was slightly ajar. I peeked in, and it was like a storage room. But there were boxes, stacked high, and something felt wrong about them. I heard voices from downstairs, the workers chatting. I quickly shut the door, feeling this cold sweat. I didn't want to get caught snooping around. But those boxes, they bothered me. I felt like I needed to know what was inside. The kids were in bed, asleep, so I tiptoed back downstairs. The workers were in the kitchen, talking quietly. I crept closer, trying to listen in. They were discussing some kind of plan, something about making sure everything was ready. I couldn't make out all the details, but it sounded serious. My heart was pounding. I needed to find out more, but I didn't want to get caught. I felt like I was in the middle of something dangerous, something I shouldn't be involved in. I went back to that room, the one with the boxes. I found a way to peek inside one without opening it fully. And what I saw, it made my blood run cold. It was like tools, but not the regular kind. Tools that looked menacing. I didn't want to think about what they could be used for. I heard footsteps approaching, so I quickly backed away, heart racing. I didn't want to be caught. I didn't know what these people were up to, but it couldn't be good. I needed to tell someone, but who would believe me? I debated calling the police, but what if I was wrong? What if it was just a misunderstanding? I felt trapped, unsure of what to do. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I had to do something. I found a way to discreetly take pictures of those boxes, those tools. I knew it wasn't much, but it was evidence. I needed to show someone, to prove that I wasn't imagining things. I left the house, trying to act normal, but inside I was terrified. I went to a neighbor's house, someone I trusted. I showed them the pictures, told them what I saw and heard. They were shocked, scared too. We called the police together, explaining everything. They took it seriously, said they'd look into it. But I couldn't shake off that fear, that feeling of being in the middle of something dangerous. The parents came home later, and I didn't tell them what happened. I didn't want to worry them, but I couldn't forget what I saw. The workers finished up and left, but I couldn't help but wonder what they were planning. Days passed, and the police investigated. They found something. Those workers, they were part of a bigger thing. Something illegal. I didn't know all the details, but they were involved in some kind of scheme. The parents were shocked when they found out. They thanked me for speaking up, for noticing something wasn't right. But even after it was over, I couldn't shake off that feeling of dread. That moment when I realized I was in the middle of something sinister, something that could have turned out so much worse. It haunted me, that fear of the unknown and what could have happened if I hadn't acted. I was babysitting for this family, and everything was going as usual. The parents left for the night, and it was just me and the kids. But then, something happened that I didn't expect. There was this family member, distant and estranged, who suddenly showed up. I didn't know much about why they were estranged, but the tension in the air was thick as soon as they walked in. They hadn't been part of the household for a long time, and their sudden appearance was unsettling. The atmosphere changed instantly. The kids seemed nervous, and I felt this unease settle in. It was like walking on eggshells. The family member, they seemed off. Unpredictable. I couldn't shake off this feeling of dread, like something bad was about to happen. They didn't talk much, just watched us silently. I tried to keep things normal for the kids, playing games and reading stories, but it was hard. Every glance from that family member sent shivers down my spine. As the night went on, things got weirder. They started asking strange questions, probing about the family, about the parents. It felt intrusive, like they were digging for something. I didn't know what to say, how to handle it. I just wanted them to leave. I tried to hint that it was getting late, that they should probably go, but they ignored it. It was like they had no intention of leaving. And that's when things took a darker turn. They started getting agitated, angry even. I could feel the tension rising. The kids were scared, and I was too. I didn't know what this family member was capable of, what they might do. The argument escalated, voices getting louder. I wanted to call the parents, the police, anyone who could help, but I didn't want to leave the kids alone with this person. I felt trapped, like there was no way out. Then, they started yelling about things from the past, things that had torn the family apart. It was like a wound was being ripped open, and I was caught in the middle of it. I didn't want to hear any of it, but I couldn't leave the kids alone. I tried to calm things down, to reason with them, but it was like talking to a wall. They were consumed by this anger, this bitterness. I was scared they'd do something, lose control. The kids were crying, and I felt this panic rising in me. I didn't know how to protect them, how to get out of this situation. I just wanted it to stop. Finally, they stormed out, leaving us shaken and scared. I didn't know if they'd come back, what they might do. I locked the doors, called the parents immediately. They rushed back home, worried and shocked. I told them everything about the family member showing up, the argument, the fear. They were grateful I handled it, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They hadn't expected this person to return, and it rattled them too. After that night, I couldn't shake off that feeling of dread. That family member, their sudden reappearance, it stirred up something unsettling. I didn't know what might happen next, if they'd come back or if this was just the start of something worse. I was babysitting for this family, and it was a regular evening. The parents had left, and it was just me and the kids. But then, there was a knock on the door. I didn't expect anyone, but when I opened it, there were these two guys standing there. They were intimidating, rough-looking, and they asked for the parents. I said they weren't home, but the guys didn't believe me. They pushed past, barging into the house. I tried to stop them, but they ignored me, heading straight inside like they owned the place. The kids were scared, and I was too. I didn't know who these guys were or what they wanted. They kept asking about money, debts, saying things they didn't understand. It was like they were looking for something. I tried to reason with them, to ask who they were, but they were aggressive. They didn't care that there were kids around. They just kept demanding to know where the parents were, where the money was. They started searching the house, rummaging through drawers and cabinets. I didn't know what to do. I felt this panic rising inside me, like we were in danger. The kids were crying, and I was trying to keep them calm, but it was hard. The guys, they kept getting more and more agitated, like they were running out of patience. I didn't know if they were dangerous or what they might do. I just wanted them to leave. I tried calling the parents, but they didn't pick up. I felt this sinking feeling in my chest, like we were all alone in this mess. I didn't want to involve the police, didn't want things to escalate, but I didn't know what other choice I had. I managed to distract the guys for a moment, telling them I'd look for some papers they wanted. While they were occupied, I whispered to the kids to hide in their room and lock the door. I felt this responsibility to protect them. I could hear the guys getting impatient, shouting, demanding answers. I didn't know where the parents kept their important papers, didn't know how to make these guys leave. I felt this overwhelming fear, like things were spiraling out of control. I heard the kids' room door lock, and I felt a tiny relief, knowing they were safe for the moment. But then, the guys found me. They cornered me, demanding to know where the parents kept their stuff. I didn't have answers, and I was scared. They grabbed me, and I tried to fight back, but they were too strong. They were yelling, saying things about consequences if the parents didn't pay up. It felt like a nightmare, this sense of helplessness. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside, and the guys bolted. I didn't know what was happening, but I took the chance to lock the door and call the police. I didn't know who had come to help, but I was grateful for it. The police arrived, and I explained everything. They said they'd look into it, but I couldn't shake off that fear. What if those guys came back? What if they found out the kids were still inside? The parents came home later, and I told them what happened. They were shocked and worried. They said something about debts, loans, but I didn't understand the whole story. All I knew was that it was terrifying. After that night, I couldn't forget the fear I felt. The thought of those guys coming back, of the kids being in danger, it haunted me. I didn't know how to protect them, how to keep them safe from something so unknown and threatening. It made me realize how vulnerable we all could be, how easily chaos could invade our lives. I was babysitting for this family, just like any other night. The parents left, and it was me looking after the kids. But then, there was a call. It was the family member's ex-partner. They hadn't been around for a long time, and nobody expected them to resurface like this. They sounded agitated, angry even. They wanted to talk to the family member, but they weren't here. I told them that, but they didn't listen. They said they were coming over anyway. I felt this knot in my stomach, this sense of impending trouble. I didn't know much about this ex-partner, just bits and pieces from what I'd heard. But it was enough to know they were trouble. There were stories about fights, arguments, and things that had gone wrong between them and a family member. The kids were watching TV, unaware of what was happening. I tried to act normal, but I felt this tension building up inside me. I didn't want anything to happen to the kids, didn't want them to get caught up in this mess. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped a beat. I opened the door, and there they were, looking angry and unstable. They pushed past me, marching inside like they owned the place. I tried to stay calm, to reason with them, but they were on edge. They kept asking about the family member, demanding to know where they were. I said they weren't home, but that just seemed to make them angrier. They started shouting, making threats, and I felt this fear creeping in. I tried calling the parents, but they didn't answer. It felt like we were all alone in this situation. I didn't know what to do, how to handle this person who seemed so unpredictable and angry. The kids sensed something was wrong, and they looked scared. I tried to keep them occupied, away from this person, but it was hard. They were adamant about finding the family member, about settling things. I tried to reason with them again, to tell them to leave, but it was like talking to a wall. They were fixated on finding the family member, on causing trouble. I didn't want the kids to be in the middle of this, but I didn't know how to protect them. The ex-partner started searching the house, rummaging through drawers and cabinets. I felt this panic rising in me, this sense of helplessness. I didn't want anything to happen to the kids, didn't want this situation to spiral out of control. They kept getting more and more agitated, yelling and making threats. I didn't know if they were capable of hurting anyone, but I didn't want to find out. I felt this overwhelming fear, like we were all in danger. I tried calling the police, but they arrived just as the ex-partner was leaving. They took my statement, but I felt this lingering fear. What if they came back? What if they found out where the family member was? The parents came home later, and I told them what happened. They were shocked and worried. They said something about a troubled history with the ex-partner, about restraining orders, but I didn't know the whole story. All I knew was that it was terrifying. I was babysitting for this family, and everything seemed fine. The parents had left, and it was just me and the kids. But then, something strange happened with their pet, a dog. It was usually friendly, but that night, it acted different. It started with little things, like growling at me when I approached it. I thought maybe it was just having a bad day or something. But then, it got worse. It started snapping at the kids, which was so unlike it. I tried to calm it down, but it was like it didn't recognize me. The kids were scared, and I was too. I didn't know what had gotten into the dog. It was barking aggressively, pacing around, like it was on edge. It wouldn't listen to any commands, wouldn't stop being aggressive. I tried to keep the kids away from the dog, but it seemed fixated on us. I didn't want it to attack, didn't know what to do to stop it. I felt this sense of panic rising in me, like we were in danger in our own home. I tried calling the parents, but they didn't answer. I didn't want to leave the kids alone with the dog, but I didn't know how to handle it. It was like the dog had changed overnight, and I didn't know why. I thought maybe it was sick or hurt, but it didn't seem like that. It was more like it was aggressive for no reason. It kept snarling and baring its teeth, and I felt this fear, this uncertainty about what it might do. I tried to get the kids into a room, away from the dog, but it followed us. It was like it was guarding us or something. I didn't know if it was protecting us or if it saw us as a threat. I felt this overwhelming fear, this feeling of being trapped. I didn't want the kids to get hurt, and I didn't know how to get us out of this situation. I felt this responsibility to protect them, but I didn't know how against the family pet. The dog kept growling, its behavior becoming more and more aggressive. I felt this panic taking over, not knowing what might set it off. I didn't know if it would attack or if it was just acting out. I tried to find something to distract the dog, to calm it down, but nothing worked. It was like it was in this state of frenzy, this rage that I couldn't understand. I heard scratching at the door, and I realized the dog had chased us into the room. I felt this sense of dread, this fear of being trapped. I didn't know how to protect the kids, how to keep them safe. I could hear the kids crying, and I felt this guilt, this helplessness. I didn't want anything to happen to them because of the family pet. I wished I knew what to do, how to calm the dog down. Suddenly, the dog stopped, like it had snapped out of it. It looked confused, then slowly backed away. I seized that moment, grabbed the kids, and locked ourselves in a room. I heard the dog pacing outside, but it didn't try to get in again. I didn't know what had just happened, what had caused its sudden change in behavior. The parents came home later, and I told them everything. They were shocked and worried. They said something about the dog's behavior being unusual, but I didn't understand why it had acted that way. After that night, I couldn't shake off the fear. The thought of the pet turning aggressive, of the kids being in danger, it haunted me. I didn't know how to protect them from something so unexpected and terrifying. It made me realize how unpredictable things could be, how quickly a situation could turn dangerous. I was babysitting for this family, and everything seemed fine. The parents had left for a night out, and I was looking after the kids. It was all normal until there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I went to see who it was. There were these two strangers at the door, asking if someone else lived here. They seemed off, their faces hidden under hoods. I said it was just me and the kids, but they looked at each other like they didn't believe me. They kept asking to come inside, saying they had the wrong address. But something about their tone, their insistence, made me uneasy. I tried to politely say no, but they just stood there, not leaving. I felt this fear creeping in, this sense of danger. I didn't know who these people were or what they wanted. They looked like they didn't belong in our neighborhood, and I didn't want them near the kids. I tried to close the door, but one of them put their foot in to stop it. They started getting pushy, saying they needed to come inside to check something. I didn't buy it, but I didn't know what to do. I called the parents, but they didn't answer. It felt like we were alone in this situation. I didn't want to let these strangers in, didn't trust them, but I didn't want to provoke them either. I tried to keep calm, to think of a way out, but my heart was pounding. The kids were watching, scared, and I felt this responsibility to protect them, to keep them safe from these strangers. The strangers kept getting more insistent, their voices getting louder. I could see the fear in the kids' eyes, and it made me even more anxious. I didn't want to let them in, didn't want anything to happen to us. I tried to sound confident, to tell them to leave, but they didn't listen. It was like they were waiting for something, for a chance to get inside. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, like something terrible was about to happen. Then, there was a noise from the backyard, like someone trying to open a window. I felt this surge of panic, realizing there might be more of them. I didn't know what to do, didn't know if we were in danger from multiple sides. I told the kids to hide in a room and lock the door. I felt this urgency, this need to protect them at all costs. I wished I knew how to handle this, how to keep them safe. I grabbed a phone and dialed 911, telling them there were strangers trying to get into the house. I felt this sense of desperation, hoping the police would come soon, before something terrible happened. I heard the strangers trying to force the door open, and I was terrified. I didn't know if they were armed, if they were going to hurt us. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense of helplessness. Suddenly, there were sirens outside, and I felt this wave of relief. The police were here. I heard shouting and then footsteps running away. I didn't know what had just happened, but I felt this immense gratitude that the police had arrived in time. The parents came home later, and I told them everything. They were shocked and worried. They said something about suspicious people in the area, but I didn't understand why they'd come here. After that night, I couldn't shake off the fear. The thought of those strangers trying to get inside, of the danger we were in, it haunted me. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but it made me realize how vulnerable we all could be, how easily danger could knock at our door. I was babysitting for this family, just a regular night. The parents had hired me recently because their old babysitter had left abruptly. They didn't say much about why she left, but I didn't think much of it at the time. But that night, something changed. I was playing with the kids when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, the former babysitter. She looked angry, her eyes burning with this intensity that made me uncomfortable. She demanded to come inside, but I hesitated. She barged in without waiting for my answer, and the atmosphere changed instantly. It was like this heavy tension filled the room. I didn't know what she wanted or why she was here, but something felt wrong. She started accusing me of taking her job, saying I had no right to be there. I tried to explain that the parents hired me, but she wouldn't listen. Her words were harsh, filled with resentment and anger. The kids were scared, and I was too. I didn't know this woman, but the way she looked at us made my skin crawl. I felt this fear creeping in, this sense of danger that I couldn't shake off. She started acting erratic, pacing around, getting more agitated. I tried to calm her down, to reason with her, but it was like talking to a wall. She was fixated on something, on blaming me for something that wasn't my fault. I tried calling the parents, but they didn't pick up. It felt like we were alone in this, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want things to escalate, but I didn't know how to handle her. She started making threats, saying she would make us pay for taking her job. Her voice was filled with this venom that sent shivers down my spine. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this fear of what she might do. She started searching the house, rummaging through drawers, looking for something. I didn't know what she was looking for, but I felt this panic rising in me. I didn't want her to find anything, didn't want her to hurt us. I tried to keep the kids away from her, to protect them, but she seemed determined. I felt this responsibility to keep them safe, but I didn't know how against this unpredictable woman. She was acting more and more erratic, and I was scared she might hurt us. I felt this surge of adrenaline, this need to get us out of there. But I didn't know if I could, if she'd let us go. I managed to get the kids into a room, locked the door, and called the police. I felt this relief that they were on their way, but also this fear of what might happen before they arrived. I could hear her outside, banging on the door, shouting. I didn't know if she had something with her, if she was capable of doing something worse. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense of vulnerability. The police arrived, and there was shouting, commotion. I didn't know what was happening, but I heard her being taken away. I felt this mix of relief and fear, not knowing what might have happened if the police hadn't arrived. The parents came home later, and I told them everything. They were shocked and worried. They said something about the former babysitter having issues, but I didn't understand why she had targeted us. After that night, I couldn't shake off the fear. The thought of her coming back, of the danger she posed, it haunted me. I didn't know how to protect the kids, how to shield them from someone so unpredictable and threatening. I was putting the kids to bed when I heard hushed voices coming from downstairs. I thought maybe the parents had come back, but it didn't sound like them. I went to check, and I saw the parents talking to someone I didn't recognize. They looked serious, their voices low. I didn't want to intrude, so I went back to the kids' room. But I couldn't shake off this feeling of unease. I mean, what were the parents doing talking to someone this late at night? I tried to focus on the kids, read them a story, but I kept hearing those voices downstairs. It was bothering me, making me feel on edge. Later, I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and I saw the parents were gone. The person they were talking to was still there, sitting in the living room. They looked at me, and there was this strange intensity in their eyes. I asked if they needed anything, but they just smiled, this unnerving smile. They said they were part of the family, a distant relative, and they were here for a family tradition. I didn't know what they meant by that, but something about their demeanor made me feel uneasy. They said it was a tradition to check on the kids at night, make sure they were safe. It sounded weird, but I didn't want to argue. They insisted on going to the kids' rooms, said it was important for the tradition. I didn't feel right about it, but they kept saying it was a family thing, and I didn't want to upset them. As we walked towards the kids' rooms, I noticed this weird symbol carved into the wall. I didn't know what it was, but it made me feel uneasy. I tried to ignore it, but it lingered in the back of my mind. When we got to the rooms, the relatives started whispering something under their breath. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded odd, like some kind of chant. I felt this chill running down my spine. They said everything was fine and that they'd take care of the kids. But the way they looked at them, it was like they were sizing them up, assessing them. I felt this urge to get the kids away, but I didn't want to cause a scene. I went back downstairs, but I couldn't shake off this feeling of dread. Something about that tradition, that relative, it didn't sit right with me. I wanted to leave, take the kids with me, but I didn't know if I was overreacting. I heard more chanting, this time louder, and it sent shivers down my spine. I felt this instinct to protect the kids, to get them out of there. I didn't know what was happening, but it felt wrong. I called the parents, but they didn't answer. I felt this sinking feeling in my chest, this fear that something was really wrong. I didn't want to leave the kids alone with that relative, but I didn't know what else to do. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and I felt this surge of panic. The relative had this strange look in their eyes, and I knew I had to get the kids out of there. I grabbed them and rushed towards the door. But as I tried to open it, I realized it was locked from the outside. I felt this fear gripping me, this realization that we were trapped. I heard the chanting getting louder, echoing through the house. I tried to break the door open, but it wouldn't budge. I felt this overwhelming sense of helplessness, not knowing what was happening. Suddenly, everything went silent. The chanting stopped, and there was this eerie stillness in the air. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I just wanted to get the kids out, keep them safe. Then, I heard this low growl coming from upstairs, and it sent a chill down my spine. I didn't want to know what it was, but I knew we had to get out of there, fast. I managed to break a window and get the kids out. We ran as fast as we could, not looking back. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew it was something terrifying. I called the police, told them everything. They arrived at the house, but by then, that relative was gone. I felt this sense of relief that we were safe, but the fear lingered. The parents came home later, and I told them what happened. They looked shocked, said something about a family tradition that was supposed to protect the kids. But I didn't understand how that could be protecting them. It felt like something out of a nightmare. I responded to a babysitting ad, hoping for an easy gig to earn some cash. The family seemed nice enough when I arrived, polite, welcoming. But as the night progressed, I stumbled upon something that chilled me to the bone. The parents had mentioned they needed a sitter because their youngest child had night terrors. They seemed anxious, almost secretive about it. I didn't think much of it initially, thinking it was a common issue with kids. The children were sweet, obedient, and I tucked them into bed without any trouble. But as the night wore on, things started feeling strange. The house had this eerie quietness, a heaviness in the air that I couldn't quite place. I wandered around, trying to find something to distract myself. That's when I stumbled upon a locked door. It piqued my curiosity. I hadn't seen that door before. I tried to shake it off, but something about it nagged at me. I asked the parents about it earlier, but they brushed it off, saying it was just an old storage room. But their response, it felt rehearsed, like they were hiding something. As the night deepened, I heard whispers, faint but unmistakable. I followed the sound and found myself in front of that locked door again. The whispers seemed to be coming from behind it, muffled and eerie. I felt a chill run down my spine, but my curiosity got the better of me. I jiggled the doorknob, hoping it would budge, but it was firmly locked. I tried to listen in, but the whispers faded into silence. I tried to shrug it off, to focus on my job. But the house, it felt different now, like it was hiding secrets in its walls. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. As I passed the parents' room, I noticed a photo on their nightstand, a picture of them with 3 children. But I'd only seen 2 kids earlier. It didn't make sense. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe the 3rd child was away. But then, I overheard a conversation between the parents. They mentioned a 3rd child, a son who had passed away. They spoke in hushed tones, their words carrying a weight of sorrow and guilt. The pieces started coming together, the locked room, the whispers, the missing child. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a sense of dread settling in. I didn't know what to make of it, but it felt deeply unsettling. I checked on the kids, feeling an overwhelming need to protect them. But then, I heard footsteps, coming from that direction, the locked door. My heart raced, and I froze, unsure of what to do. I wanted to leave, to run away from whatever was behind that door. But something drew me closer, a need to uncover the truth. I approached cautiously, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. And then, a sound of faint sobbing, a child's voice. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to make out the words. It was a boy, whispering for help, pleading to be let out. I wanted to unlock the door, to rescue him, but fear paralyzed me. What if it wasn't real? What if it was some trick? I didn't know what to believe, but the sobbing, it felt too real to ignore. I couldn't stay there any longer. I made up an excuse, saying I had an emergency and needed to leave. The parents seemed startled, almost alarmed, but I didn't wait for their response. I hurried out, feeling the weight of that house lift off my shoulders. As I walked away, I couldn't shake off the feeling of guilt. What if there was a child trapped behind that door, seeking help? But what if it was something more sinister, something I couldn't understand? I never went back to that house. The memory of the whispers, the locked door, a hidden history. It's a chilling reminder of how some secrets are better left undiscovered. It's a night I wish I could forget, but its haunting echoes linger in my mind. I was babysitting for this family, a regular night just like any other. The parents had left for a dinner party, and it was me and the kids at home. Everything was fine until I heard a noise coming from downstairs. I thought maybe it was just the house settling, but then I heard it again. It sounded like footsteps, but I knew it wasn't the kids because they were asleep. I felt this knot forming in my stomach, this sense of unease. I went downstairs to check, hoping it was nothing, but then I saw them. There were these people, strangers, standing in the living room. They looked at me, and I froze. I didn't know who they were or how they got in. I wanted to scream, to run, but fear held me in place. They looked at me with these cold, empty eyes, and I felt this surge of terror. I didn't know what they wanted, didn't know why they were there. I tried to ask them who they were, what they were doing, but they didn't say anything. They just stood there, staring at me. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, like I had walked into a nightmare. I wanted to run upstairs, grab the kids, but I was scared they might follow me. I didn't know if they were armed or what they might do. I just wanted to keep the kids safe, but I felt helpless. I tried to stay calm, to think of a way out, but my heart was pounding. I didn't know if I should try to reason with them or find a way to escape. I just knew I had to protect the kids. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't want to make any sudden moves. I didn't know if they would react badly, if it would put the kids in more danger. I felt this desperation, this need to get us out of there. One of them started moving towards me, slowly. I felt this fear gripping me, this sense of impending danger. I didn't know if I should fight or try to reason with them. I just wanted to survive. I managed to grab a phone and dial 911, whispering that there were intruders in the house. I felt this surge of relief that help might be on the way, but I didn't know if they would arrive in time. The strangers kept advancing, and I felt this overwhelming fear. I didn't know what they were capable of, what they might do to us. I just wanted the nightmare to end. Suddenly, I heard sirens outside, and the strangers bolted. I didn't know what had just happened, but I felt this immense gratitude that the police had arrived. The police searched the house, but the intruders were gone. I felt this mix of relief and fear, not knowing if they might come back. The parents arrived home later, and I told them what happened. They were shocked and worried, saying they didn't know who those people were. They said they'd install better security, but it didn't erase the fear I felt. I was babysitting for this family, just a regular night, or so I thought. The parents had left, and it was me and the kids at home. They were asleep, and I had some time to myself, so I decided to explore the house a bit. I'd been there a few times before, but I hadn't really checked out the basement. It was always closed, and I was curious. I found the door, and it was locked, but I managed to find the key tucked away in a drawer. I opened the door, and this chill ran down my spine. There was this strange smell, this musty odor that made me uneasy. I switched on the light, and the dim glow revealed this narrow staircase leading down. I felt this sense of curiosity and dread, this urge to know what was down there. I took a deep breath and started descending, step by step. As I reached the bottom, I saw it. There were these shelves, covered in dust and old boxes. It felt like a forgotten place, hidden away from the rest of the house. I started going through the boxes, and that's when I found it. There were these old photographs, but they weren't just any pictures. They were photos of the family, but in each one, their faces were scratched out. I felt this surge of fear, this sense of something terribly wrong. I didn't understand why someone would deface these photos like that. It felt ominous, like someone was trying to erase them from existence. I kept searching, and I found this old diary tucked away in a corner. It was dusty and worn, but the entries inside sent shivers down my spine. It talked about strange rituals, about sacrifices made in the basement, and about a dark family secret. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I read, the more terrified I became. It felt like I had stumbled upon something sinister, something that should have stayed hidden. I heard a noise upstairs, and it startled me. I quickly closed the diary and put everything back where I found it. I felt this overwhelming need to get out of there, to escape that dreadful place. I closed the basement door, but I couldn't shake off the fear. I didn't know what to do with what I had discovered. I wanted to tell the parents, to warn them, but I didn't want to seem nosy or make them think I was imagining things. I tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on taking care of the kids. But every noise made me jump, every shadow felt like it was watching me. I couldn't shake off this feeling of dread. Later that night, as I was putting the kids to bed, I heard something again. It was this faint chanting, this eerie sound that seemed to be coming from below. I felt this panic rising in me. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the fear was overpowering. I didn't want to go near the basement again, but I felt this pull, this need to know what was happening. I mustered up the courage and went to check, and the door was open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. I felt this icy coldness in the air, this oppressive feeling that made it hard to breathe. I switched on the light, and the basement was empty. But I could still hear the chanting, this haunting sound that seemed to echo in my mind. I didn't know if I was hallucinating or if something was really happening. I rushed back upstairs, locked the basement door, and tried to call the parents. But the line was dead. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense of being trapped. I went to check on the kids, and that's when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I felt this terror gripping me, this sense of imminent danger. I didn't know what to do, where to hide. The footsteps stopped right outside the kids' room, and I heard this whispering, this chilling voice. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. I just prayed that whatever it was, it would go away. Suddenly, everything went silent. I didn't know if it was over or if something worse was about to happen. I felt this overwhelming dread, this feeling of helplessness. I heard a creaking noise, and I peeked out. The basement door was open again. I felt this urge to run, to escape, but I couldn't leave the kids behind. I mustered all my courage and went to close the door, but I saw something inside. There was this figure, shadowy and indistinct, standing in the darkness. I felt this terror paralyzing me, this sense of facing something beyond my comprehension. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and ran to the kids' room. I grabbed them and rushed outside, not looking back. I didn't know what I had seen, but I knew we had to get away. I called the police from a neighbor's house, told them everything. They arrived at the house, but they didn't find anyone or anything in the basement. I felt this mix of relief and fear, not knowing if it was really over. The parents arrived home later, and I told them what happened. They looked shocked, but they didn't say much. I didn't know if they believed me or if they thought I was making it up. I was babysitting for this family, and things were going fine until that night. The parents had mentioned some issues with the neighbors over the property line, but I didn't think much of it until it became a nightmare. It was getting late, and I heard this commotion outside. I went to check, and there were the neighbors, arguing with the parents about the property line. It seemed tense, like something was about to explode. The parents left in a hurry due to an emergency, and the neighbors lingered, shooting angry glares our way. I felt this tension building up, this sense that things were about to take a dark turn. I tried to keep the kids occupied, but the argument outside was getting louder. I heard shouting, threats being thrown around. It felt like a storm brewing, and I didn't know how to protect the kids from it. The neighbors were yelling about the property line, saying something about our house being on their land. It sounded serious, but I didn't understand why it had to escalate like this. I tried to call the parents, but they were unreachable. I felt this sense of being alone in a dangerous situation. I didn't know what to do, how to handle angry neighbors who seemed ready to snap. I heard a loud bang on the door, and I felt this surge of fear. The kids were scared, and so was I. I didn't know if the neighbors were going to do something rash. I tried to reason with them, to explain that the parents weren't here, that we should sort this out calmly. But they seemed beyond reason, fueled by anger and frustration. They demanded to come inside, saying they wanted to see the property lines for themselves. I felt this overwhelming sense of danger, this fear that letting them in might make things worse. I refused, but they started getting aggressive, banging on the door, yelling threats. I felt this panic rising in me, this need to protect the kids. I didn't know what these neighbors were capable of. I told the kids to hide in a room and lock the door, just in case. I didn't want them caught up in whatever was about to happen. I felt this responsibility to keep them safe, to shield them from this chaos. I heard a window shatter, and my heart sank. They were trying to force their way in. I felt this surge of adrenaline, this fight or flight response kicking in. I called the police, telling them what was happening. I felt this desperation, this need for help to arrive soon. I didn't know if we could hold out until they got here. The neighbors managed to break the door open, and I felt this terror gripping me. I tried to keep calm, to talk them down, but they were beyond reason. They looked wild, fueled by anger and aggression. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense of helplessness. They started moving towards me, and I didn't know what they were planning to do. I just wanted the nightmare to end. The kids were screaming, and I was trying to shield them. I didn't know if the police were on their way or if we were on our own. Suddenly, there were sirens outside, and the neighbors bolted. I felt this wave of relief, but the fear lingered. I didn't know if they'd come back, if this was really over. The police arrived and took statements. They said the neighbors had left, but they'd keep an eye on things. I felt this mix of relief and anxiety, not knowing if it was truly safe. The parents came home later, and I told them what happened. They were shocked and worried, saying they'd sort things out. But the fear of those neighbors, of that confrontation, it lingered. I didn't know if we'd ever feel safe in our own home again. I was supposed to babysit this 5-year-old boy. The parents had hired me, and I arrived at their house, ready for a regular night. But when I got there, something was off. The boy, he wasn't 5. He looked older, maybe 15 or so, but something about him was really creepy. He had this eerie way of staring at me, his eyes piercing, like he was looking right through me. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I got the age wrong, but it didn't feel right. He didn't act like a teenager either. He was eerily quiet, barely said a word, just watched me with this unsettling intensity. I tried to engage him in activities, games, anything to break the silence, but he seemed disinterested. He'd just sit there, unmoving, staring. It made me feel uneasy, this sense of being watched. I asked if he wanted to play or if there was anything he liked doing, but he just shrugged, this weird smirk on his face. I felt this chill running down my spine, this instinctual feeling that something was really wrong. I decided to call the parents to ask if there had been a misunderstanding, if the boy was actually older. But the phone was dead, no dial tone, nothing. I felt this sense of being cut off from the outside world, this feeling of isolation. I tried to reason with myself, to tell myself I was overreacting, but the unease wouldn't go away. The way he looked at me, it felt like he knew something I didn't. As the night went on, things got stranger. I heard these weird noises coming from his room, like whispers or murmurs. I tried to ignore it, but it sent shivers down my spine. I went to check on him, and he was sitting there, in the dark, whispering something under his breath. I asked if he was okay, but he just grinned, this unnerving grin that sent a jolt of fear through me. I felt this overwhelming urge to leave, to get out of there, but I didn't want to leave the boy alone. I didn't know what was happening, but it felt like a nightmare. I tried to distract myself, to focus on something else, but the feeling of being watched, of something being off, it persisted. It felt like this heavy weight on my chest, this sense of impending danger. I heard more strange noises, this time from the kitchen. I hesitated, not sure if I should investigate. But this feeling of dread pushed me to check, and I wish I hadn't. I saw the boy, standing there, in the dark kitchen. He was whispering again, but this time, there was this sinister tone to his voice. I felt this terror gripping me, this fear of the unknown. I asked what he was doing, but he just kept whispering. I didn't understand the words, but it felt ominous, like something dreadful was about to happen. I tried to leave, to get out of there, but the front door wouldn't open. It felt like it was stuck, like it was deliberately keeping me inside. I felt this panic rising, this fear that I couldn't escape. I heard the boy's footsteps behind me, and I turned around. His eyes, they were different, this darkness in them. I felt this overwhelming terror, this certainty that something terrible was about to unfold. He spoke, his voice deep and chilling, saying things I couldn't comprehend. I felt this sense of being trapped, of being in a nightmare with no way out. I tried to reason with him, to plead, but he just laughed, this disturbing laughter that echoed in the darkness. I didn't know what to do, how to protect myself. Suddenly, everything went silent. The whispers stopped, the laughter faded. I felt this eerie stillness, this suffocating silence. I tried the door again, and this time it opened. I didn't hesitate, I ran, not looking back. I didn't know what had just happened, but I knew I had to get away from that place. I called the police from a neighbor's house, told them what happened. They arrived at the house, but there was no sign of the boy. I felt this mix of relief and fear, not knowing what might have occurred if I hadn't escaped. The parents came home later, and I told them what happened. They looked shocked, saying the boy was just 5 and that they didn't understand. But I knew what I saw, what I felt. It was a rainy night, and after putting the kids to bed, I settled down to watch a movie. Everything seemed normal until there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not on a stormy night like that. When I opened the door, there was this man, drenched from the rain, claiming he was lost and needed to use the phone. He looked harmless, so I let him in, trying to be helpful. I offered to call for help, but he insisted on using the phone himself. I felt this sense of unease, but I didn't want to be rude or distrustful. I showed him to the phone and went back to the living room, trying to focus on the movie. As time passed, he didn't come back. I started feeling this creeping anxiety, wondering what was taking him so long. I tried to convince myself that maybe he was having trouble making the call, but something felt off. I got up to check on him, but as I reached the hallway, I saw him standing there, not using the phone. He was just staring at the family pictures on the wall. It made me feel this jolt of fear, this sense of intrusion. I asked if he needed any help, trying to hide my discomfort. But he didn't respond. He just kept staring at those pictures, this eerie silence hanging in the air. I felt this instinct to get him out of the house, to make sure the kids were safe. But before I could say anything else, he turned to me, this unsettling grin on his face. It sent shivers down my spine. He said something about admiring the family, about how lucky they were to have a babysitter like me. It felt like he knew more than he should, like he wasn't just a lost stranger seeking help. I felt this urge to get away, but I didn't want to provoke him. I tried to maintain a calm facade, to steer him towards the door without causing a scene. But he just stood there, blocking the way. I asked him politely to leave, but he didn't budge. Instead, He started talking about how much he admired the house, how he loved to live in a place like this. It sounded innocent, but there was something sinister in his tone. I felt this growing fear, this realization that I might be in danger. I didn't know what he was capable of, and the kids were asleep upstairs, oblivious to the situation. I tried to think of a way out, to signal for help without alarming him. But he kept talking, this unsettling monologue about the family, the house, and it made my skin crawl. I glanced towards the door, trying to find an opportunity to make a move. But as I looked back, he was closer, too close for comfort. I felt this surge of panic, this fear of being trapped. I tried to back away, to create some distance, but he kept advancing. He said something about not wanting to leave, about how comfortable he felt in the house. It sounded like a threat disguised as a statement. I felt this desperation, this need to protect the kids. I tried to reason with him, to convince him to leave peacefully. But he just laughed, this chilling laughter that made my blood run cold. I didn't know what to do, how to get him out. The phone was too far, and I didn't want to turn my back on him. I felt this sense of being completely vulnerable, completely at his mercy. I tried to grab something, anything, to defend myself. But before I could, there was a loud banging on the door. It was the police, responding to a call I had made earlier. The man froze, and in that moment, I felt this rush of relief. The police entered, and I told them everything. They took the man away, and I felt this overwhelming mix of fear and gratitude. The parents came home later, and I told them what happened. They were shocked and thankful, but I couldn't erase the terrifying encounter from my mind. It was a night I would never forget, a night where danger had knocked at the door, and I had narrowly escaped its grasp. I was babysitting for this family, just a regular night looking after two teenage boys while their parents were out for a date night. Everything seemed normal until one of the boys started acting strange. As the evening went on, one of the boys, let's call him Jake, seemed restless. He started pacing around, looking anxious. I asked if everything was okay, but he seemed hesitant to talk at first. Then, out of the blue, Jake started saying something that sent shivers down my spine. He confessed that he had done something terrible, something he couldn't take back. I felt this chill run through me, this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't know how to react, what to say. I urged him to explain, to tell me what had happened. But he just looked away, this haunted expression on his face. It felt like the air had turned cold, this heavy atmosphere settling in. He began telling me about an incident, a mistake he couldn't undo. He spoke in a trembling voice, his words painting a grim picture. I felt this growing fear, this sense of being trapped in a nightmare. He described an accident, something that had gone terribly wrong. It felt surreal, like I was in a movie scene. But the fear in his eyes was real, and it sent shivers down my spine. I tried to comprehend the gravity of what he was saying. I felt this overwhelming mix of disbelief and horror. I wanted to help, to understand, but I didn't know what to do. Jake was trembling, his voice quivering as he spoke. He said it was an accident, something that spiraled out of control. But the details he revealed, they were bone-chilling. I felt this urge to leave, to get away from the situation. But I couldn't abandon Jake, couldn't turn my back on someone in distress. Yet, I didn't know how to handle this revelation. He begged me not to tell anyone, saying it was a mistake, that he didn't mean for it to happen. I felt this sense of being pulled into something ominous, something beyond my control. I tried to calm him down, to reassure him that we'd figure something out. But the weight of his confession lingered in the air, this cloud of fear hanging over us. I didn't know what to believe, what to do next. I wanted to help, to find a solution, but this feeling of dread wouldn't leave me. I felt this overwhelming responsibility, this fear of being involved in something dangerous. I wanted to call for help, but I didn't want to worsen the situation for Jake. I urged him to talk to his parents to seek their guidance, but he was adamant about keeping it a secret, about burying what happened. I felt this sense of helplessness, of being caught in a terrifying situation. I tried to stay composed, to keep Jake calm, but inside, I was terrified, not knowing what would happen next. The night felt endless, this heavy burden weighing me down. When the parents returned, I struggled with whether to tell them or to keep Jake's secret. I felt this moral dilemma, this conflict tearing me apart. I decided to speak with the parents, to let them know about Jake's distress. I felt this immense pressure, this fear of the repercussions. As I disclosed what happened, the parents' faces turned pale. They exchanged worried glances, and I realized this was much bigger than I had imagined. The parents thanked me for letting them know and assured me they'd handle the situation,